Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. Tonight we examine two major developments that could reshape the security landscape of the Middle East, where diplomacy is once again being tested against the realities of conflict. Our first focus is the US brokered Israel-Lebanon Framework Agreement. I have with me right now Dr. Auqaab who's a geostrategic expert joining me in the studio. Thank you for being with us. Dr. Auqaab, when we look at this in terms of what's happened till now, how do you see it? Do you think that there is, a serious kind of sort of effort that has a backbench in place, which is going to hold this through, or do you think that there is too much risk of escalation? There are too many of those who want to see this, of course, not work, and overall the situation remains very, very shaky. What are your thoughts?
I think the second part. I think the situation is still shaky. Fundamentally, Hezbollah is not part of this agreement.
Yeah.
It never signed this agreement. It was not part of the talks. It was not part of any makeup of the agreement and discussions. It was completely left out. If you have one of the belligerents that is left out of a peace agreement, which is fundamentally the rationale behind Israel, then how can that so-called peace agreement work? And it's a roadmap only, by the way. It's only a framework. It is not a peace agreement in real terms. They have not come to some form of peace. Fundamentally, again, I think we're looking at something that is on very shaky grounds. It's been highlighted by the media, and it's in the interest of the United States to put it as this, and Israel, to satisfy Israeli strategic interests, you may say, because they're not going to leave the area. But Hezbollah is not part of it, so why would they accept it? They rejected it because they're not party to the agreement, and that's fundamentally the flaw, and that flaw is 100%.
But in terms of the ceasefire itself, Dr. Auqaab, we saw what happened, earlier on, and the fact that from the very start, we know both US and Tehran, this is not an easy, as far as the agreement is concerned, from this MOU to get to the agreement stage. No one is saying it's easy. Both sides have also acknowledged that there is a lot on the table here, and there's a lot of past acrimony, if one can say, that remains in the air. Although, of course, there are those like Pakistan who have been, facilitating that, who have been negotiating on for both the states. So in terms to wade through this, what do you think are those essential elements needed at this time on both sides, as far as Tehran and the US is concerned? And of course, what's happening as far as Hezbollah is concerned, that situation remains central. Am I right?
Yes, absolutely. The first point in the MOU that was agreed upon between the United States and Iran, Lebanon was central to that, the first point of the MOU. When Secretary of State Rubio goes around saying it's nothing to do with it, well, he's completely incorrect. And that is the disagreement within the American system as well. When the president has assigned it, he has no right to say anything else. What he's doing is his personal ambitions for a future presidential race in the primaries, and there's no doubt about that. He's trying to drum up support, especially with AIPAC and his potential donors who are billionaires. But that puts this in jeopardy, and that's where you come into this between Iran and the United States. Iran feels that they should maintain, the United States should have a across the board understanding that this should be accepted, and it is accepted, and there should not be any contradiction in terms. But when you have Israel continuing operations, bombarding Beirut when it wants, continuing the operations within Lebanon, and remember, Hezbollah is Lebanese. You see, Israel wants to depopulate the whole area and evacuate and basically have zero Lebanese who are Shia origin living there. Well, that's ethnic cleansing. In real terms, that's what they're doing. This is cleansing of that environment. So that goes against international law altogether. So their stipulations, their agreements within this are a complete contradiction to international law in real terms, if they stick to that.
Like we were earlier saying, Dr. Auqaab, both sides have accused each other of violating the agreement. There's also, neither, like I said, have walked away from the negotiations. So is this going to be something you think that's going to continue while the negotiations happen? Because, of course, there are some parts already underway from, what the agreement has said. and both sides have said they have a commitment to diplomacy at play. Have they accepted that these violations would continue, sort of tacitly?
I think what you're looking at is maintaining a strong hand from each side to make sure that the deterrence is there, to appreciate from each side that nobody's really going to give so much. There is no real gross violation. These are small tacit things as far as Lebanon is concerned. But you've got to look at the rationale behind this agreement in Lebanon. The rationale for Netanyahu, for example, is multifaceted. Maintain his power base, maintain his coalition government with extreme right-wing coalition partners, and he has to maintain that through force, and that's his policy line amongst his constituents.
But at the same time, of course, there's that risk that he will cross that line.
And he has them many times. And this is where the problem lies. This is where the United States, and Trump has been very overt in his expletives when he's talking to Netanyahu, and he's had private conversations to tone it down a little bit. And this is where we've come to this form of status quo, as we could say. I don't call it an equilibrium per se, but it's relaxed the tension a little bit. And that is what is going to allow it to move forward, if the Israelis allow it to move forward without any really aggressive move, which they're likely to do as well more, I think.
Fair enough. In our second segment, we turn to the latest developments between Iran and the United States. Fresh military exchanges in and around the Strait of Hormuz have once again raised fears of a wider regional conflict. Dr. Auqaab, when we look at, as far as US and Israel is, of course, the question of uranium, the question of, as far as the nuclear question, looms large. In terms of how this agreement will be shaped, how do you see things, where do you see things going? Because we also earlier, of course, had that comment from the president that, to expect Iran not to have missiles is also, unrealistic. So how do you look at that? Do you think that the US is also sort of thawing, giving in a little, and this is indicative of both sides coming to a middle?
I think this was a classic example of Trump. Go to a position that is never going to be acceptable, same with Iran, and come closer to the middle on some form of compromise in one way or another. Work on the periphery, which is what actually Hormuz was at the beginning, until we realized that it has global ramifications, the systemic ramifications. So then it became at the forefront, and then, because this is what Iran wants as well, the nuclear part can be negotiated separately. And that will take a long time. It's not as if it's going to happen overnight and it's going to take 6 weeks. I think this agreement is going to take a lot longer. If Trump actually wants to have a better agreement than what he tore up, then he's got to give it time. And there has been some breakthrough in that. But there are still some red lines between the two on the nuclear issue. And this is where there has to come to some understanding. For example, the enriched material right now, where is it going to go? Will they turn it into uranium oxide? So then it becomes defunct as a source for enriched uranium, or will they give it to a third party like Russia or maybe China? And it's even being filtered out, maybe even Pakistan, because the relationship between and our existing experience in these. So I think there's a lot up for debate here, and it's a tenuous, precarious road to peace. And that's what we've got to realize. It can be disrupted at any point, and each side has to calibrate. And this is where the Lebanon issue comes in. Put significant pressure on Israel, and it is working, I think. But we have to, one thing I want to put into this is that Israel is occupying foreign territory. That foreign territory is domestic to Hezbollah, and they will see this as a foreign occupation force that doesn't belong there, and they're going to retaliate for any reason that they see fit. So that's got to be taken into the calculus as well. And we've got to recognize that Hezbollah is not an extra regional actor. It belongs there, irrespective of its politics and what happened and its support for Iran and vice versa. We have to look forward to that. And that's what's going to be the trump card for Trump in real terms, if you can negotiate that.
In terms of what Netanyahu said, he said that, you know, the Israeli forces will remain outside in southern Lebanon and until Hezbollah is disarmed. Do you think that that is, you know, sort of a false bravado as far as Israel is concerned? And this game has been played long enough as far as Netanyahu is concerned, and you know, that all parties have seen through it?
What I'm thinking here is that Israel, I think, personally, you may disagree, wants to prolong its stay in Lebanon as long as they can for their perceived interests for occupation. In the long term, their Greater Israel plan is still viable as far as they're concerned, the perception that it can occur. Iran was always counter to that. It was always the obstacle, and it was always going to present itself as that, so Israel could never really expand. Lebanon was a case example. Why would you blow up all the houses like Gaza unless you're going to occupy it for long term and normalize that occupation over time and make sure you increase control over time? So you make an agreement, but not with Hezbollah, okay? They weren't party to it, to say that Hezbollah must be disarmed. But these are people who are local to that environment, who see an occupation force coming in, destroying their property and occupying their environment, and they're not going to do anything. It is completely foreseeable that this would not work. I mean, that this would not work, actually. This will not work at all. And the fact of the matter is, it is just setting this so-called peace agreement to failure, as it has done before, to maintain that long-term uncertainty in that environment, as well as putting pressure on Iran to maybe retaliate, to have more hostilities erupt between the United States. And they've planned this again and again and again, especially in the other wars that occurred, and what they did in Syria, what they've done in Iraq and other places. You know, this is just a puzzle that they've always worked, and this is a strategy they've used, and it's been quite successful in real terms. But the United States must recognize its own strategic interest before any other nation, and that's what it comes down to, this, whether they can. And J.D. Vance did articulate this. And when it really comes down to it, they can squeeze funding to Israel and armament of Israel and make them recognize that.
I want to Right. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Auqaab. Thank you for joining us today. Of course, at this time, when we look at the US and MOU that has been signed, of course, the facilitation that has happened, the diplomatic effort that has been at play by Pakistan and other countries also, one thing is certain, that there is a continued acknowledgement of the fact that this must go into a full-blown agreement. Both sides want that. Thank you so much for joining us today on Perspective.